Hello and welcome to a new episode of Cargo Masterminds. We are almost at the first anniversary of countries around the world closing their borders with a very hard lockdown measures to contain the spread of coronavirus. The COVID pandemic has played havoc with the world economy, plunging the globe into the worst economic crisis since World War II. It disrupted the aviation industry like never before, with passenger flights almost to nothing. The crisis intensified for the air cargo sector as 50% of the total cargo capacity is in the bellies of passenger flights, which just disappeared overnight. And the world needed air freight badly to move critical goods around the world to deal with the pandemic. Crisis often brings the best in people and in organizations. In just about a year since the COVID became a pandemic, we have a vaccine, not one, but many, authorized for emergency use. The last 1 month, we have seen how the super product of the century, the COVID vaccine, and vaccine flights are getting a rockstar welcome at airports around the world. And I must say that it is difficult to miss an Emirates aircraft taking off and landing with precious COVID vaccines. They have done multiple flights carrying vaccines to different parts of the world. How did Emirates Sky Cargo, the cargo division of Emirates, bring its best to deal with the crisis? How did Emirates Sky Cargo, one of the top 5 cargo carriers in the world, as per IATA's 2020 World Air Transport Statistics based on scheduled freight ton kilometers, choreograph the return of the cargo capacity? How does the cargo carrier create capacities to make itself a preferred carrier for vaccine transport in the months and years ahead? With normalcy slowly returning, or human society slowly adjusting to the constantly changing circumstances around, how does Emirates Sky Cargo reposition its priorities for other key vertical businesses? To discuss this and much more, I am so pleased to welcome Nabil Sultan, Emirates Divisional Senior Vice President Cargo, into this episode of Cargo Masterminds. Nabil, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Rija. Thank you for giving us the opportunity to come on your network.
Nabil, it's been 9 months since I spoke to you in my last interview, and you were actually and all of us were in the thick of things in terms of a pandemic dealing with a crisis. And we have a vaccine now. You are vaccinated. I'm waiting for my dose. Bring us up to speed with the current cargo operations at Emirates. How have things improved since hard lockdown has been relaxed?
Rija, of course, I mean, the pandemic, no doubt, has left a huge sort of impact globally on all the businesses. No doubt, airlines have been the worst hit as an industry. But with all of that, of course, we in cargo had to make sure that the capacity is available to move essential goods, commodity that are absolute must, and it needs to get to a different part of the world. So no doubt, I think if you recall in our previous discussion, back in March, we had to immediately look at various areas where we can sort of provide the capacity, even though passenger demand have slowed down dramatically. And of course, by March, of course, our operation in Emirates have almost come to halt. Therefore, of course, at that time, we had to immediately look at operating a lot of our passenger aircraft as cargo. And of course, with the unique equipment and aircraft that we have as in Emirates, we immediately are able to launch our 777-300ER, which is a great aircraft. It has the capability of uplifting almost 25 ton when passenger on board of the aircraft, but without passenger, it even gave us the capability of pushing the uplift almost to double of that, and we're able to almost move 50 to 60 ton on some of our flights, moving cargo across the board. Of course, it was essential at the beginning to move absolute essential commodity like simple as food. It was absolutely essential to get some of these commodities around the world. A lot of the countries, especially around the Middle East, very much dependent on moving food commodities into a lot of these countries. There are countries who are very much reliant on production markets to move meat and food and different type of commodities. So it was essential to get all of that going. And then very soon, of course, we had to make sure that we provide the sufficient capacity to move essential medical commodities and goods like the PPE and various other essential products. So again, we had to make sure that sufficient capacity is available into the Far East, China, Korea, Thailand, where we're able to sort of pick up a lot of these commodities and move it to the rest of the world, as the rest of the world needed those sort of commodities almost urgently. So that was the first, I think, 6 months of our operation, where a lot of the focus was on moving massive amount of PPE, food, essential commodities, and so on and so forth. Of course, as we progressed, we've continued to operate more and more flight into different parts of the world. Today, we cover almost about 130 destinations around the world. And of course, our passenger flights have gradually started to come back since, I would say, November, December. So we've started to see a ramp up on passenger, and therefore that has also given us more opportunity to provide that additional capacity into the rest of the world. But of course, the latter part of last year and then the beginning of this year, we've seen the vaccine production started to move. And of course, as that has sort of started to come to effect, we also needed to make sure that sufficient capacity is provided to moving into a lot, to move a lot of these vaccines urgently into different parts of the world. So that's how the whole story had sort of evolved, if you like.
Nabil, how serious is the supply and demand mismatch for Emirates, as well as when you observe the global air freight industry? Is that still a serious concern?
Well, I think just to put things in perspective, of course, a lot of the vaccines that move around the world today are required to move under certain temperature control. And therefore, of course, the challenge and the difficulty is that, there are limitations in terms of how much dry ice can you actually carry per aircraft. I mean, just to put things in perspective today, a lot of the vaccine that move today. So if you take, Pfizer, for example, where they require a lot of their passive packaging to move on board of the aircraft with certain amount of dry ice on each package, and therefore there is a limit on how much dry ice can you actually carry. The maximum that you can put on a normal passenger flight in terms of volume and capacity, you're talking roughly about 4 to 5 pallets per aircraft that you can uplift on a passenger aircraft. On a freighter, you can probably do a little bit more, where it gets to about 9 to 10 pallets per aircraft. So even though you have the cargo capacity, you will not have the capability to move larger volumes, and that's where the constraint comes from. Having said that, I think the fact that we have a large and massive fleet of aircraft, it really gives us the capability of moving these vaccines as and when the production happens. I mean, so far, of course, we have not come across any specific challenges with regard to providing the needed capacity to move the vaccine. But we probably also need to understand that right now, a lot of the vaccine movement have not taken place yet, because most of the vaccine, whether it's being produced within Europe, America, or the producing, or India, where the major vaccines being produced, a lot of the vaccine remains more or less within the same region. So if you look at Europe, for instance, a lot of the transportation for the vaccine happens with trucking, and therefore air freight is not required. Same thing happening in the USA, or in big areas, or in China, or in India. But to me, of course, the second stage of when the vaccine will start to sort of move, and then you will require air freight transportation to move it into a lot of the sort of developing nations, throughout the Middle East, Africa, maybe Indian subcontinent, where air freight becomes essential. That's where we're going to probably require a much larger capacity to sort of move this vaccine as and when the production gets ready. This is the sort of commodity where obviously, as soon as the production happens, you would want it to move. There is no room for keeping it until you have the transportation is ready. So there is a huge responsibility and burden on us. It's a social responsibility on all airlines, all freight forwarders to sort of ensure that we do our best to work together in making sure that the sufficient capacity is available to move these vaccines in needed countries to address the requirement.
Nabil, I just want to take you back to some specific in terms of the number of total cargo only passenger flights so far. How many 777-300ER aircraft have been repurposed with seats removed to load cargo? And the number of A380 cargo charters. I've heard that one was. Did you do more of that? If you can give us a little more details about those numbers.
Well, I mean, we were moving on. We were using purposely, passenger aircraft of almost about 80 to 90 sort of passenger aircraft to move cargo. I mean, that's the level of production that we've had at the time. We were doing almost 2,000 sort of flights per week to be able to cater for some of these sort of commodities and moving essential goods. So you could imagine the scale of moving, and of course that all of that spreads over almost 130 destinations around the world. Of course, we have also the 11 freighter that we use to move larger sort of quantity of vaccines and other essential commodities as needed, and then sort of bring them to Dubai and then redistribute them to the rest of the world. So yeah, it's a massive operation on a large scale. Dubai has got a solid infrastructure today and capability as a hub with purpose-built infrastructure to sort of accommodate redistributing these vaccines across the world. So we have definitely made use of that, and I believe that the coming period it will even become far more interesting and challenging for all of us to make sure we get these vaccines in a timely manner.
Nabil, are you more hopeful now that the passenger network would come back or the passenger traffic would return much faster than what you said maybe like 6 months back, what you thought in 6 months back?
Well, I mean, it's yet to be seen. I mean, I think all airlines are trying to do their best to see what can be done. Of course, with the recent, third wave of the infection that we have seen, that has kind of slowed down things once again. But I think, all airlines are trying to do their best to operate to more destination. But of course, with the lockdown situation that we're seeing that has taken place in different parts of the world, it has become a bit more difficult and challenging to operate into some of the countries. Having said that, I think most governments have seen the importance of keeping their airspace available, open for the cargo movement, at least to ensure that the commodity and the supply chain does not get impacted. And therefore, we've continued to sort of deploy that capacity where it's needed. But of course, we're quite hopeful as hopefully, by the summer, if the passenger demand start to come back again, hopefully we should have more frequency into a lot of these destinations, and therefore providing that additional capacity that is needed to move the vaccine in a faster manner.
Correct me if I am wrong. I think at the beginning of 2020, you had 12 777 freighters, and now you have, I think you retired one. As the person who heads the cargo division, would you be extremely happy to have a couple of more freighters and to play around at this time?
Well, I mean, to be honest, we have not returned any of the freighter. I mean, just a correction. We will continue to have 12 freighter. We continue to operate the 12 freighter. Of course, I mean, some of our freighters coming to the end of their terms, but again, that's still under negotiation to see, whether we will be extending those freighters. So yeah, right now I think the demand is as such that most likely we will continue to keep these freighters going. But I think what's also important to understand is that, we're probably lucky to have our passenger aircraft, and of course the 777ER and the capacity it provides, we actually call them mini freighter, because I mean, without passenger, the capability of the 777-300ER is almost 50 to 60 ton. That is literally a half freighter load in terms of capability. And the fact that, we have now removed some of the seating from almost about 17 passenger aircraft. That literally gives you a half freighter load in terms of capability that came in as an additional capacity. And then, of course, on top of that, we operate the normal passenger aircraft where we use both the belly and the seating to sort of upload cargo. So yeah, I mean, in terms of capacity, I don't think we have any concerns really, because we have the various type of aircraft that gives us, incredible capability by all means.
Nabil, would you be continuing to do the same repurposing the aircraft as and when the demand comes up?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I think we're measuring the demand on a regular basis and to understand exactly how is it shaping up. But of course, I mean, nothing will stop us from again removing seats from additional aircraft if needs be to operate them as cargo. I mean, that's the flexibility that we have with the A380, but with the 777. So it's been a great story, and I think the fact that this aircraft has got such an incredible capability with cargo, especially when you don't have passenger, it's incredible, and we've really made use of this aircraft.
And how many A380 mini freighter do you have? Is it just one, or you have more?
Well, I mean, of course, the A380 again, we're probably the largest holder of that type of an aircraft. We've been operating this aircraft as a charter for cargo, especially with high commodity value products. When we actually run out of the 777, we immediately deploy the A380. So it has again proven to be quite successful for us. We've managed to secure large contract for essential commodity, moving things from almost the Far East into USA and Europe. So it's been again a great support and a backup when we needed that aircraft to deploy and be able to ensure that at least we meet the capacity requirement.
Nabil, coming to the Vaccine Logistic Alliance, that seems to be a collaborative project that is starting in different parts of the world, and this is based out of Dubai. You have a multi-model approach, and Emirates Sky Cargo comes in as the air freight stakeholder in the alliance. Give us a little more of details as to how Emirates Air Cargo plays its role in the alliance.
Sure. I think, under, of course, the directive of the Vice President and the Prime Minister of UAE, the ruler of Dubai, of course, we have, he's directed us to sort of create this alliance to ensure that we're able to facilitate the vaccine movement into the developing nation over this coming period. And we all know that, you have the entire Middle East, Africa, maybe part of Indian subcontinent, where we will require specific arrangement. And I think one of the biggest challenge that a lot of these countries probably face today, especially in the developing nations, is the fact that the infrastructure and the airport facility and the cool chain facility into some of these airports are not in par with the requirements. So just to give you an example, I mean, if you are to land a full freighter load into, one of the African destination, or, it will be quite difficult for them to store such a large quantity of vaccine and be able to consume it over a period of time. So the whole entire alliance was to look at the logistics of how can we work with these developing nations and entities who can actually provide the solution for that. So, of course, part of the alliance, of course, we have the International Humanitarian City in Dubai, which has been an expert in moving a lot of these sort of essential relief into some of these countries. And they're expert in this area. So they've came as part of also this alliance. We have DP World, who's provided massive sort of storage capability in Dubai, and these are all fully cool chain GDP compliance facility. And of course, on the air side, we have our own purpose-built GDP compliance facility, which also gives us an airside sort of capability. And Dubai Airport also came in and given us an additional facility. So combining all of these forces and knowledge and information about how to sort of bring in these vaccines as and when they're ready into Dubai, and be able to sort of store these large quantities in Dubai and be able to almost move it on a smaller quantity to a lot of these destinations, so that we can almost move quantities for almost a day use or 2 days use, and then continue to replenish these destinations using our passenger belly, our passenger network, almost on a daily basis, so that the infrastructure in these countries does not become a major obstacle. That's the model. That's the solution that we're looking at. And of course, there's been almost a weekly update in terms of all the logistics that needs to be put in place to ensure that the whole entire supply chain and logistic for these vaccine gets to Dubai, into these final destinations, and then do the clearance, the last mile delivery into the hospitals. So there's almost a daily replenishment of these vaccines with almost zero impact on the quality and the efficiency of these vaccines moving into these destinations.
Nabil, how much additional investment have gone into this facility to make it GDP compliant and ready for the COVID vaccine transport?
In Dubai, when I just talk about, the airside facility, you're talking at least about 700 to 800 million dollars that has been invested into this infrastructure to create it both at DXB and DWC at Al Maktoum Airport. So, these are massive sort of infrastructure. Just to give you the scale between Dubai, DXB, and DWC, we're probably talking about at least 30,000 square meter area of absolute cool chain facility that is completely GDP compliance. We also have, of course, the reefers between the two airports, the cool dollies at the airport, to ensure that the temperature deviation is almost zero throughout the whole entire supply chain while it's transiting through Dubai. So these are almost essential for moving the vaccine. But of course, we shouldn't also forget that Emirates and Dubai, we've been a major player for pharma movement in the world, where we've moved pharma in a larger quantity across the globe today, simply because we have purpose-built facility, process, SOPs in place that is absolutely certified by all European American standard. And I think that building on that is what has given us this massive capability of moving the vaccine as well.
Nabil, 9 months back when I did the last interview, one of my questions was about how focused or what is the role your other verticals play, and you said there is no other verticals. The all focus was on critical goods. Now, 9 months down the line, how do you relook at your other vertical businesses? Has there been a much more attention paid to other key verticals under Emirates Sky Cargo?
Well, I think we've tried to sort of address all the critical, at least verticals in the whole entire supply chain basket, if you like. So of course, we've seen how essential air freight played as a role at the beginning of the pandemic, where food was the absolute essential commodity, and getting essential commodity in relation to fruits and vegetable and different type of food into a lot of the countries that have actually depended on Emirates of making sure that this food supply happens almost on a regular basis, but remains there. So at the time that was the key priority, but then things gradually shifted. Once the food kind of stabilized, we've seen a major shift in focus, and therefore the PPE came in, and that became then the focal point of getting the respirators there, the oxygen sort of commodities, and various medical equipment related to the COVID impact on humanity. So therefore, getting these protective gears into a lot of hospitals, a lot of countries, have became an absolute paramount for us. I remember we were literally moving charters into different part of the world, big countries, small countries, just to make sure that all of these protective gears get to the hospital as quickly as possible. So, people could be treated. It was a matter of life and death at the time. So we've addressed that in a massive way. And then, of course, we've seen a huge transition into now the vaccine and providing that sort of into the rest of the world. So it was essential to see how this whole supply chain and logistic have sort of evolved and the priorities have changed. And therefore, we throughout this whole pandemic has to also change and adjust to the priorities and make sure that our facility, our capability is there, readily available to address these essential sort of commodity at any given time.
Nabil, one of the biggest change that we have seen in the pandemic because of the pandemic is how people consume and how people do their purchases. The shopping has become completely online, not just for non-essential, but even for essential goods. And in 2019, in October, you launched Emirates Delivers. So e-commerce is a very critical part of your business, and you completed 1 year, and it's been a phenomenally successful division within Emirates Sky Cargo. How big this is going to be in your overall portfolio of business?
Well, of course, it's a no secret that e-commerce is, growing exponentially around the world today. And yes, I think online buying have become quite massive through different, age brackets today into our consumer sort of market. So this is a vertical that will continue to grow. And of course, the essence of e-commerce today is all about the reach and the frequency, and therefore our ability to sort of be able to deliver these smaller packages with the last mile delivery almost to people's home in the shortest span possible. And I think that is something that is quite unique probably to Emirates, because I mean the fact that we have this vast network around the world with large number of sort of fleet capacity, and on top of that is the frequency that we have into a lot of these different parts of the world. So I mean we operate into major cities, secondary cities with nothing less than a daily flight, and that just gives us a huge capability today to move these packages in a fastest way possible.
In about 2 months, we complete the current financial year 2020-2021. So how do you expect to close the current fiscal?
Well, of course, I mean, from a cargo perspective, I think we've done fairly well. We've tried to do the right thing, of course, throughout this whole pandemic, and therefore the emphasis has been to ensure that we provide for the right commodity, we move essential goods, and ensure that we meet our social responsibility. But of course, cargo as an industry have done exceptionally well, of course, throughout this whole pandemic, simply because the demand was there, and of course the passenger capacity have completely disappeared from the market overnight. So we had to make sure that the essential capacity is provided to move things. Now, of course, moving forward, we will see how things fare out eventually. But yeah, I think looking at this year, again, we see demand for cargo to continue over this probably coming year.
Nabil, it's always a pleasure to talk to you because you understand the industry so thoroughly, and you have deep insights about what is happening in the global air cargo industry. Thanks for sharing your thoughts and insight. Hope to connect with you again soon. Thanks once again for being with us today.
Thank you, Reggie. Thank you very much for giving us the opportunity. We really appreciate, I think, the time that you have spent with us, and I hope we've given some feedback that is of use to you and to your followers in your network.
That was Nabil Sultan, Emirates Divisional Senior Vice President Cargo, joining us in our Cargo Masterminds interview series. We will be back again next Monday with another episode and promise to bring an interesting air cargo leader as our new guest. Thanks for watching.